You find yourself questioning your own memories. Little doubts creep in. Things you were sure of now seem fuzzy. It's a subtle shift. You start to wonder if you misunderstood. If you overreacted. If maybe, just maybe, it was all in your head. This feeling isn't accidental. It's a carefully constructed reality. And you are living in it. Today, we explore 7 signs that someone is subtly shaping your thoughts, your feelings, your decisions, without you even realizing it. Stay with us. Video structure, 8-10 minute. 0:0-1:30. We begin with the subtle shift. It's not an immediate alarm. It's a slow erosion of your certainty. You start to question your own perceptions. Did they really say that? Was that really what first heard? This isn't about being forgetful. It's about another's carefully placed doubt. They introduce a small inconsistency, a slightly altered recollection. It feels almost accidental at first. You might dismiss it. But it plants a seed. A tiny, persistent question mark in your mind about your own memory. 1:33:0. Then comes the isolation. Not physical, but emotional. You find yourself pulling away from others, or perhaps being subtly nudged away. Conversations with trusted friends might start to feel less validating. They might not understand. Or perhaps the manipulator has already subtly influenced your perception of them. You begin to rely more on the manipulator's version of reality. Their perspective becomes the dominant one. It feels like a natural consequence of your experiences, but it's a carefully constructed narrative. 3:0-4:30. Next, the constant, low-level criticism. It's rarely overt. It's woven into everyday interactions. A backhanded compliment. A gentle suggestion that you could do better. A pointed observation about a flaw you hadn't considered. This isn't about constructive feedback. It's about chipping away at your self-esteem. Each small remark, individually insignificant, accumulates. It creates a background hum of inadequacy. You start to believe these criticisms are valid, that they are simply your own failings being pointed out. From 36:0. Consider the erosion of your boundaries. What was once unacceptable becomes gradually tolerable. The manipulator tests your limits, not with force, but with persistence. They push a little, then retreat. Then push again, a fraction further. Each time, you adjust. You find reasons to accept the new normal. It feels less like a violation and more like a compromise. You convince yourself it's not that big of a deal. This gradual acceptance makes it harder to identify where the boundary was, or when it was crossed. 6:0-7:30. Observe the guilt trips. A powerful tool. When you assert yourself, or try to reclaim your space, guilt is deployed. It's often framed as concern or disappointment. First thought we were a team. First just worried about you. Or perhaps, after all first VE done for you, this isn't about genuine care. It's about making you feel responsible for their emotions or desires. You feel obliged to comply, to avoid the discomfort of their perceived unhappiness. Your own needs take a backseat to their manufactured emotional burden. 7:39:0. Pay attention to the gaslighting. This is where your reality is actively distorted. They deny things they said or did. They twist events to make you seem unreasonable or forgetful. That never happened. You're overreacting. You're imagining things. It's designed to make you doubt your sanity. You begin to question your own judgment, your own perception of truth. The world starts to feel unstable, and their version of events becomes the only anchor. 9:0-10:0. Finally, the feeling of obligation. You owe them something. It's never clearly defined, but it's always present. A sense of debt. This can stem from favors, perceived sacrifices, or simply the emotional manipulation that has taken root. You find yourself doing things you don't want to do simply because you feel you have to. This obligation is a gilded cage, keeping you tethered to their agenda, often without you even realizing the bars are there. Dark psychology narrative format ***. You begin to question your own memory. Small details about past conversations, events, or agreements start to feel fuzzy. Someone might subtly reframe a shared experience, planting a seed of doubt about what truly happened. They might say, "Are you sure that's how it went?" First, remember it a bit differently, delivered with a tone of gentle concern, not accusation. This isn't about a simple disagreement, it's about a persistent, low-level erosion of your confidence in your own recall. You find yourself second-guessing your instincts, the ones that usually serve you well. A sense of obligation starts to creep in, even when it doesn't logically follow. You might find yourself doing favors, taking on tasks, or agreeing to things you wouldn't normally consider, all without a clear request or a defined reason. It's as if a debt has been created, an unspoken understanding that you owe them something. This feeling can be amplified by small gestures of kindness or help they've offered, which you then feel compelled to repay in disproportionate ways, creating an imbalance you can't quite articulate. Your boundaries become blurred, then disregarded. What was once a firm line you wouldn't cross is now permeable, almost forgotten. They might push the edges of your comfort zone gradually, a little at a time. A casual comment that skirts your personal space, a request that infringes on your time, a probing question that feels too intimate. Each instance is small enough to be dismissed, but collectively they chip away at your defenses, making you more accepting of later, larger intrusions. You start to accept what once would have been unacceptable. You find yourself constantly trying to please them, to avoid their subtle disapproval. Their reactions, whether a sigh, a frown, or a disappointed tone, become disproportionately important. You begin to anticipate their needs and desires, often before they are even expressed, modifying your own behavior to ensure their contentment. This isn't healthy consideration, it's a deep-seated anxiety that their approval is conditional and vital for your own peace of mind. You adjust your actions, your words, even your thoughts, to align with their perceived expectations. You start to feel isolated, even when surrounded by people. Conversations with others might feel less engaging, or you might find yourself censoring what you say, fearing judgment or misunderstanding from those you feel are truly observing you. The manipulative individual often creates a subtle wedge between you and your support network, making you feel that only they truly understand you, or that others wouldn't grasp the nuances of your situation. This perceived isolation makes you more reliant on their perspective, their validation. You experience a gradual shift in your own values or beliefs. Things you once held firmly begin to feel less important, or perhaps you find yourself adopting perspectives that align more closely with the manipulator's viewpoint. This isn't a sudden conversion, it's a slow acclimatization. Through repeated exposure to their arguments, their rationalizations, and their framing of issues, your own internal compass begins to recalibrate, often without you consciously noticing the change. What once seemed wrong now feels acceptable, even logical, within their framework. The entire dynamic feels normal, yet deeply unsettling. This is perhaps the most insidious sign. Because the manipulation has been gradual, and each step was small enough to be justified or dismissed, the overall pattern begins to feel like the natural state of your relationship or interaction. You might feel a persistent, low-grade discomfort, a sense that something isn't quite right, but you can't pinpoint it. It's like a constant hum in the background of your life, a subtle distortion that you've become accustomed to, making it hard to recognize the manipulation for what it truly is. You adjust to the unease, normalizing the abnormal. You find yourself questioning your own memories. Small details about past conversations or events begin to shift in your mind. What you recall with certainty yesterday now feels hazy, uncertain. It's a subtle erosion, not a sudden break. You might replay interactions, trying to pin down what actually happened, but the clarity you once had slips away. This makes you hesitant to trust your own judgment, a crucial first step in losing footing. Your perception of reality starts to warp. Things that seem obviously wrong to an outsider are presented as perfectly normal, even logical, within your immediate circle. This normalization is key. It's not about outright lies, but about reframing. A demand that feels unreasonable is explained as a simple necessity. A boundary crossed is presented as a minor misunderstanding, easily smoothed over. You begin to accept these reframed versions because the alternative, that you are being misled, feels too uncomfortable to consider. You start to feel responsible for the manipulator's emotions or actions. Their bad moods become your fault. Their unhappiness is a sign you haven't done enough. This isn't about empathy, it's about misplaced accountability. You find yourself constantly trying to appease them, to fix what you perceive as your own shortcomings, rather than recognizing that their emotional state is their own to manage. This creates a cycle where you are always seeking approval and trying to prevent negative reactions, which keeps you off balance. Your boundaries are gradually pushed. What you once considered unacceptable behavior becomes a recurring event. Each instance is small, easily justified. They were just joking, or they didn't mean it that way. The significant thing is not the individual incident, but the slow, steady encroachment. You find yourself agreeing to things you don't want to do, or tolerating treatment you wouldn't have accepted before. It happens so incrementally that you don't notice the line being crossed until you're already well past it, and then it feels too late to draw it back. #1. Illusion of control, hook. You think you're making your own choices. You believe you're in charge of your decisions. This is the first subtle shift. It feels like normal agency. You weigh options, consider consequences, and then you act. Or so it seems. The feeling of control is powerful. It's the bedrock of our independence. When this feeling is subtly eroded, it's often unnoticed. You might find yourself making a decision, feeling confident about it, only later to realize the path was laid out for you. The options presented were not truly open. Consider a work project. You're asked for your input. You suggest a few approaches. Then, the person guiding the project steers you toward one specific option. They might frame it as building on your idea, or as the most logical next step. You agree, feeling your input was valued. You followed your own reasoning, or so it appears. But the outcome was predetermined. Your suggestions were allowed, but only within a very narrow, predefined corridor. It's a sophisticated dance. You feel you're leading, but your steps are guided. This illusion is maintained by a careful presentation of choices. You are given a few paths, and you select one. This selection feels like freedom. It's the illusion of a menu when only one dish is available. You're not forced. You are presented with what looks like a selection. You choose what appears to be the best of the options offered. The alternatives might seem less appealing, or even illogical, but that's by design. You adapt your desires to fit the presented reality. The real power lies in shaping the options themselves. When you are presented with a decision, and you feel a strong, almost unquestionable inclination toward one particular choice, it's worth a moment's pause. This inclination might not be entirely your own. It could be the result of carefully curated information, subtle suggestions, or the framing of the situation. You're not being told what to do. Instead, the environment is being shaped so that you want to do what was already planned. You feel like you've arrived at the conclusion yourself, but the journey was subtly engineered. Open by challenging the viewer's confidence. You start to question things. Small things, at first. Did that conversation really happen the way you remember it? Were your words truly that clumsy, that inappropriate? It's a subtle shift, a quiet erosion of your certainty. You find yourself replaying interactions, dissecting your own contributions, searching for the flaw that must be there. This self-doubt isn't born from genuine introspection, it's a carefully cultivated seed. Suddenly, your own judgment feels unreliable. Someone might have made a comment, delivered with a certain tone, a specific look, that plants a seed of uncertainty about your perception. It's not an accusation, not directly. It's more like a gentle suggestion that perhaps you're being too sensitive, too reactive, or simply misunderstanding the situation. This makes you pause, makes you second-guess your initial, confident reaction. You begin to wonder if you're overreacting. A friend casually mentions, "You always seem to take things so personally," or a colleague might say, "Are you sure that's what they meant?" They're usually so direct. These statements, seemingly innocuous, chip away at your confidence in your own interpretations. You start to believe that perhaps the problem lies within you, that your understanding is flawed, not the other person's actions or words. This makes you less likely to trust your gut feeling. This constant questioning makes you more pliable. When your own internal compass feels unreliable, you become more dependent on external validation or direction. You might start seeking confirmation for every decision, every feeling, afraid of making another mistake. The ease with which you once navigated social interactions or made decisions begins to feel like a distant memory. Your confidence, once a steady anchor, starts to drift. Make them believe they would notice manipulation, then undermine that belief. You think you're sharp. You believe you can spot a manipulator a mile off. You've read the books, seen the documentaries. You're too aware for that. This is exactly the thought pattern they exploit. They rely on your confidence. Your certainty becomes the very ground they can undermine. Consider this, a subtle shift in conversation. Something small, easily dismissed. They might ask about a past event, a detail you're sure about. Then, later, they'll casually mention a different version of that same event. Not aggressively, but almost apologetically. Are you sure that's how it happened? First, remember it a bit differently. You pause. You might even check your own memory, a flicker of doubt. It feels insignificant, a minor misremembering. But the seed is planted. You start to question your own recall, not because they're wrong, but because you might be. Then comes the gaslighting, disguised as helpfulness. They'll point out your oversensitivity or your tendency to overthink. When you react to their subtle jabs, they don't get defensive. Instead, they express concern. First, I'm just worried about you. You seem a little stressed lately. Are you feeling okay? This isn't about admitting fault, it's about making you doubt your own perception of reality. The manipulation isn't in their actions, but in your interpretation of them. You begin to believe that perhaps your feelings are the problem, not their behavior. This process erodes your trust in your own judgment. The manipulation isn't a direct attack, it's a slow, steady erosion of your internal compass. You start to rely on their version of events, their interpretation of your feelings. Because they seem so reasonable, so concerned, their version feels more stable, more normal. You adjust your own reality to fit their narrative, not because you're forced, but because it feels easier, less confusing. You start to wonder if your initial perception was just a misstep, a momentary lapse in your otherwise keen awareness. Goal: create tension and personal relevance. You find yourself questioning your own judgment. Small things, at first. A forgotten appointment. A misremembered conversation. You might shrug it off. Everyone forgets things. But then it happens more. You start to doubt your memory. Your grasp on reality feels a little shaky. This isn't about being forgetful. It's about a subtle erosion of your certainty. There's a persistent feeling that something is off, but you can't quite pinpoint it. Conversations leave you feeling confused. You agree to things you don't remember discussing. You feel a constant, low-level anxiety, a sense that you're not quite in control of your own narrative. This unease is a quiet alarm, a signal that your perception might be being nudged, ever so slightly, off course. You start to over-apologize. For minor inconveniences. For things that aren't your fault. It becomes a habit. A reflex. You feel a need to smooth things over, to de-escalate situations that never seem to fully resolve. This constant need to placate, to make amends for perceived wrongs, is a sign that your boundaries are being tested, and perhaps, already crossed. Your needs and desires begin to fade into the background. You find yourself prioritizing others' feelings and requests, often at your own expense. What you want, what you need, becomes less important than maintaining a fragile peace or avoiding conflict. This consistent self-neglect, this quiet surrender of your own voice, is a powerful indicator that your priorities are being subtly, systematically shifted. You isolate yourself, or feel increasingly isolated. Friendships feel strained. Family interactions become tense. You might withdraw, or others might seem to drift away. This sense of disconnection, this growing chasm between you and your support network, can be a deliberate outcome, designed to make you more reliant on the source of the manipulation. You begin to accept unreasonable requests or behaviors. What once would have shocked you now seems almost normal. You find yourself rationalizing actions that don't sit right, making excuses for behavior that clearly crosses a line. This normalization of the unacceptable is a hallmark of successful manipulation, where the boundaries of what is considered acceptable are slowly, incrementally, redrawn. There's a feeling of walking on eggshells. A constant awareness of someone else's mood, their unspoken expectations. You anticipate their reactions, adjust your behavior to avoid upsetting them. This hypervigilance, this constant monitoring of another person's emotional state, drains your energy and erodes your sense of freedom. You are no longer acting, but reacting, perpetually on guard. You find yourself questioning your own memories. Small details about past conversations or events begin to shift in your mind. What you recall with certainty yesterday now feels hazy, uncertain. It's a subtle erosion, not a sudden break. You might replay interactions, trying to pin down what actually happened, but the clarity you once had slips away. This makes you hesitant to trust your own judgment, a crucial first step in losing footing. Your perception of reality starts to warp. Things that seem obviously wrong to an outsider are presented as perfectly normal, even logical, within your immediate circle. This normalization is key. It's not about outright lies, but about reframing. A demand that feels unreasonable is explained as a simple necessity. A boundary crossed is presented as a minor misunderstanding, easily smoothed over. You begin to accept these reframed versions because the alternative, that you are being misled, feels too uncomfortable to consider. You start to feel responsible for the manipulator's emotions or actions. Their bad moods become your fault. Their unhappiness is a sign you haven't done enough. This isn't about empathy, it's about misplaced accountability. You find yourself constantly trying to appease them, to fix what you perceive as your own shortcomings, rather than recognizing that their emotional state is their own to manage. This creates a cycle where you are always seeking approval and trying to prevent negative reactions, which keeps you off balance. Your boundaries are gradually pushed. What you once considered unacceptable behavior becomes a recurring event. Each instance is small, easily justified. They were just joking, or they didn't mean it that way. The significant thing is not the individual incident, but the slow, steady encroachment. You find yourself agreeing to things you don't want to do, or tolerating treatment you wouldn't have accepted before. It happens so incrementally that you don't notice the line being crossed until you're already well past it, and then it feels too late to draw it back. ### 2. Invisible nature of manipulation. Manipulation often moves like a shadow. You don't see it coming. It doesn't announce itself with bright lights or loud noises. Instead, it operates in the quiet spaces between conversations. It's in the way a request is phrased, the subtle shift in tone, the carefully chosen words. You might feel a small nudge, a slight pressure, but it's rarely enough to trigger an alarm. It feels natural, almost like your own idea. This is its strength. Consider a simple disagreement. Instead of directly confronting your viewpoint, someone might subtly reframe the issue, focusing on your perceived flaws or past mistakes. They aren't arguing the point, they're undermining your credibility. You begin to question not just your opinion, but your ability to form a correct one. The conversation shifts from the subject at hand to your personal shortcomings, all without a direct accusation. It's a slow erosion, not an attack. This invisibility means you often don't realize you're being influenced until much later, if ever. You might find yourself agreeing to things you wouldn't normally. Or perhaps you start seeing a situation through a lens that wasn't originally yours. It feels like a natural evolution of your thoughts, a gradual understanding. But in reality, it's a carefully constructed narrative woven into the fabric of your daily interactions. You adjust your behavior, your expectations, your very perception of reality, all without a conscious decision. It just happens. The true source of these shifts remains hidden, leaving you to believe you arrived at these conclusions on your own. Explain that real manipulation is subtle, calm, and rational. Real manipulation is rarely loud or aggressive. It doesn't usually involve shouting matches or overt threats. Instead, it operates in the quiet spaces, the subtle shifts in conversation, the rational-sounding requests. It's a calm, collected approach, designed to feel entirely reasonable. You might not even notice it happening. It feels like a normal exchange, a logical progression of events. This is its strength. It disguises itself as common sense, as helpful advice, as a minor adjustment to your perspective. The manipulator doesn't need to raise their voice because they understand that reason, presented convincingly, is a far more effective tool. Think about a situation where someone gently steers your decision. They don't demand, they suggest. They present facts, or what seem like facts, in a measured tone. They might ask a series of questions that lead you to a particular conclusion, a conclusion they already had in mind. It feels like you're arriving at this thought independently. They might frame their suggestion as being for your own benefit, or for the benefit of a shared goal. This rational veneer makes it difficult to question. If it sounds logical, and it's delivered calmly, who are you to argue? This is where the subtlety lies. This calm rationality is precisely what makes it so effective and so hard to detect. It bypasses your natural defenses. When someone is being openly hostile, you know you're in a conflict. You can prepare for it, defend against it. But when someone is being calm, rational, and seemingly considerate, you let your guard down. You accept their premise, their logic. You might find yourself agreeing to something you wouldn't normally consider, simply because the way it was presented felt so sound. It's a quiet erosion of your boundaries, disguised as a reasonable discussion. Consider the long-term effects. Over time, these subtle, rational manipulations can lead you to doubt your own judgment. You begin to question why you hesitated, why you didn't see the logic sooner. The manipulator's perspective starts to feel like your own, or at least like the more sensible option. This isn't about sudden, dramatic shifts. It's about a gradual alignment, a quiet acceptance of another's viewpoint, all under the guise of calm, rational discourse. It's a slow, steady current, pulling you along without you even realizing you've left the shore. It hides inside normal conversations and everyday interactions. You might not notice it at first. It's woven into the fabric of your daily life, disguised as casual chat, friendly advice, or even a shared complaint. The words themselves seem ordinary, the tone familiar. You're discussing your day, your work, your relationships. But beneath the surface, a subtle shift is occurring, a gentle nudge in a specific direction. It feels like you're simply connecting, sharing, and understanding. Consider a conversation where you express a desire to try something new, perhaps a hobby or a career change. The response might be, "Oh, that sounds nice, but are you sure you're cut out for it? Remember how that other thing didn't quite work out? It's probably safer to stick with what you know." First, I'm just looking out for you. This isn't direct opposition. It's a well-placed doubt, framed as concern. The past is recalled not as a lesson learned, but as evidence of inadequacy. Your own judgment begins to waver, not because of a logical flaw, but because the suggestion taps into existing insecurities, amplified by the trusted voice. Then there are the small concessions. You agree to a minor request, then another, slightly larger one. Each step feels manageable, even logical in the moment. It's about compromise, about keeping the peace, about being a good friend or partner. But gradually, the boundaries of your comfort zone begin to recede. What was once a firm line becomes a blurred suggestion. You find yourself doing things you wouldn't have considered weeks or months ago, and it feels normal. The change is so gradual, so embedded in routine interactions, that you don't recognize the pattern of erosion. This manipulation often thrives on shared reality. Someone might subtly reframe an event, emphasizing certain details and omitting others, until your memory of what happened begins to align with their version. It's not a blatant lie, but a curated truth. When you express disagreement, they might respond with surprise, "Really? That's not how first remember it at all. Are you sure you're recalling that correctly?" This gentle questioning, repeated over time, can lead you to doubt your own perception, your own memory. The feeling isn't one of being attacked, but of being gently corrected, of misremembering. It's in the everyday exchanges, the back and forth of human connection, that these seeds of doubt are sown and nurtured, often without you ever realizing you're not in full control of your own thoughts. Goal: shift expectations and make the viewer uneasy. You find yourself questioning your own memory. Little inconsistencies appear in conversations you recall differently. They insist their version is the truth, and you start to wonder if you're mistaken. It's a subtle erosion of your certainty, a slow chipping away at what you know. This isn't about a simple disagreement, it's about them planting a seed of doubt so deep you begin to trust their reality over your own. Perhaps you notice a pattern of them framing your reactions as overblown or irrational. Something you express as a valid concern is reinterpreted as an emotional outburst. They might say, "You're being too sensitive," or "That's not what happened at all, you're imagining things." Suddenly, your feelings, your perspective, your very perception of events is on trial. You start to self-censor, holding back your true thoughts and feelings, afraid of being labeled as difficult or unstable. The space for your authentic self shrinks. Then there's the way they might subtly isolate you. Not through overt arguments, but by gently sowing discord or creating misunderstandings with others in your life. They might relay slightly altered versions of what friends or family said, creating distance or suspicion. This makes you more reliant on them, their interpretation of the world becoming your primary lens. You feel a growing sense of being alone, with fewer people to validate your experiences, making their narrative even more powerful. You might also experience a gradual shift in your own boundaries. Things that once felt unacceptable start to feel normal. They push a little, then a little more. Each transgression is small enough to overlook, each compromise feels minor at the time. But over weeks or months, you find yourself agreeing to things you wouldn't have considered before. Your comfort zone has been slowly, almost imperceptibly, redrawn. You've adjusted without realizing how far you've moved. You find yourself questioning your own memories. Small details about past conversations or events begin to shift in your mind. What you recall with certainty yesterday now feels hazy, uncertain. It's a subtle erosion, not a sudden break. You might replay interactions, trying to pin down what actually happened, but the clarity you once had slips away. This makes you hesitant to trust your own judgment, a crucial first step in losing footing. Your perception of reality starts to warp. Things that seem obviously wrong to an outsider are presented as perfectly normal, even logical, within your immediate circle. This normalization is key. It's not about outright lies, but about reframing. A demand that feels unreasonable is explained as a simple necessity. A boundary crossed is presented as a minor misunderstanding, easily smoothed over. You begin to accept these reframed versions because the alternative, that you are being misled, feels too uncomfortable to consider. You start to feel responsible for the manipulator's emotions or actions. Their bad moods become your fault. Their unhappiness is a sign you haven't done enough. This isn't about empathy, it's about misplaced accountability. You find yourself constantly trying to appease them, to fix what you perceive as your own shortcomings, rather than recognizing that their emotional state is their own to manage. This creates a cycle where you are always seeking approval and trying to prevent negative reactions, which keeps you off balance. Your boundaries are gradually pushed. What you once considered unacceptable behavior becomes a recurring event. Each instance is small, easily justified. They were just joking, or they didn't mean it that way. The significant thing is not the individual incident, but the slow, steady encroachment. You find yourself agreeing to things you don't want to do, or tolerating treatment you wouldn't have accepted before. It happens so incrementally that you don't notice the line being crossed until you're already well past it, and then it feels too late to draw it back. ### 3. Promise of revelation. There's a subtle whisper that suggests a grand unveiling is just around the corner. It's the promise of revelation, a hint that something significant, something that will finally make sense, is about to be revealed. This promise is often delivered in hushed tones, accompanied by a knowing look. It implies that if you just hold on a little longer, if you just trust them, the full truth will be laid bare. This truth, they suggest, will exonerate them or explain away any doubts you might have. This tactic works because it plays on our inherent desire for clarity and resolution. We want things to make sense. We want to understand motivations, especially when something feels off. The promise of revelation offers a future point where all confusion will dissipate. It's a dangling carrot, a future reward for present compliance or patience. You're told that the pieces will fit together soon, that the big picture is almost complete, and you'll finally see why things happened the way they did. Consider a situation at work. A colleague makes a mistake that impacts your project. Instead of a direct apology or explanation, they might say, "Don't worry about it now. First, I'm working on something big, and once that's sorted, everything will become clear. You'll understand then." This leaves you in limbo, questioning your own judgment or the severity of the issue, all while waiting for a revelation that may never come. The immediate problem is not addressed, but your focus shifts to the anticipated future clarity. This promise can also manifest in personal relationships. Someone might repeatedly engage in behavior that causes distress, but then reassure you with, "Just trust me. First, I'm going through a lot right now." When this period passes, and first can finally explain everything, you'll see it was all for the best. This creates a sense of anticipation and obligation. You begin to invest energy in waiting for this future explanation, rather than addressing the present reality of the behavior. The hope of understanding becomes a way to tolerate the unacceptable. Tell the viewer they are about to learn clear signs. You're about to learn the clear signs. These are subtle shifts, almost imperceptible at first, that indicate someone is guiding your thoughts and actions without your full awareness. It's not about grand gestures or overt commands. It's about the quiet erosion of your own judgment. One of the first indicators is a persistent feeling of self-doubt. You start questioning your own perceptions, your memories, even your basic competence. Things you were once certain about begin to feel fuzzy, less solid. This isn't a sudden crisis of confidence, it's a gradual chipping away. You might find yourself replaying conversations, wondering if you misunderstood, if you were too sensitive, or if you simply imagined something that happened. This internal questioning becomes a constant hum beneath the surface of your daily life. Another sign is the normalization of unhealthy behaviors or expectations. What once felt wrong or uncomfortable gradually becomes accepted. It's like slowly turning up the heat, you don't notice the change until you're already in hot water. This can apply to relationships where boundaries are repeatedly crossed, or in professional settings where unreasonable demands become the norm. You start to adapt, to make excuses for the behavior, telling yourself it's just how things are, or that you're overreacting. You also begin to notice a pattern of being made to feel responsible for others' emotions or actions. When something goes wrong, the narrative subtly shifts, placing the burden of guilt or correction onto you, even if your role was minimal or non-existent. You might find yourself apologizing constantly, even when you're unsure of what you did wrong. This creates a sense of obligation, a constant need to appease, which is a powerful tool for manipulation. Finally, observe how your decision-making process changes. You might find yourself seeking constant validation for even small choices, or conversely, making decisions based on what you think someone else wants you to do, rather than what you genuinely desire. There's a loss of your independent compass. Your own intuition, once a reliable guide, feels muted, drowned out by external influences you can't quite pinpoint. These are not isolated incidents. They are threads in a larger tapestry, woven to control, create anticipation and curiosity. There are subtle shifts you might not notice at first. A quiet redirection of your thoughts. You might find yourself agreeing to things you wouldn't normally consider. It happens so gradually, it feels like your own idea. A slow erosion of your initial position, replaced by a new perspective that seems entirely reasonable. Consider conversations where you consistently end up seeing things from another person's viewpoint, even when it contradicts your own feelings. You start to question your own memory of events. Was first really that upset? Did that actually happen the way first remember it? This creeping doubt is a common early sign. It feels like a natural process of understanding, but it's often a carefully orchestrated adjustment of your reality. You might find yourself apologizing more often, taking on blame that doesn't quite fit. The narrative shifts, subtly, until you believe you were the one who caused the problem. It's a smooth transition, almost imperceptible, making you feel like you're simply being more considerate or mature. This adaptation is key. It makes the manipulation feel like personal growth. This process often involves isolating you from your own instincts. That inner voice that warns you, that gut feeling. It gets quieted, dismissed as overthinking or being too sensitive. You learn to trust the external voice more, the one that offers a simpler, more palatable version of events. It's a quiet disarming, making you more receptive to further influence. Hint that they may already be experiencing them. You start to question your own memory. Small inconsistencies emerge in conversations. Things you distinctly recall happening, they recall differently. At first, it's a minor annoyance, easily dismissed. Perhaps you misremembered. It's a common human failing. Yet, these moments become more frequent, and the doubt begins to settle, a quiet unease in the back of your mind. You find yourself apologizing for things you're sure are true, just to keep the peace, just to avoid the subtle friction. Your perception of reality feels slightly distorted. They have a way of reframing events, twisting the narrative until it's unrecognizable. A disagreement becomes your fault, a mistake you made. A kindness they offered is suddenly presented as a burden they regret. You start to wonder if you're being overly sensitive, if you're reading too much into things. It feels like walking through a fog, where the path ahead is never quite clear, and your own footing feels uncertain. This constant reinterpretation makes you second-guess your own judgment, your own instincts. There's a growing sense of isolation. Conversations with others feel different. You might notice yourself withdrawing, less inclined to share your experiences or feelings. When you do speak up, your words might be subtly dismissed, or your concerns minimized. It's not overt criticism, but a gentle, persistent erosion of your confidence. You begin to feel like you're on an island, with your own thoughts and feelings no longer aligning with how they are perceived or acknowledged by others. This disconnect can be deeply unsettling, leaving you feeling adrift and misunderstood. You adjust your behavior to avoid conflict. This is a critical sign. You learn which topics to avoid, which opinions are best kept to yourself. You anticipate their reactions and preemptively modify your own actions or words. It feels like navigating a minefield, always careful where you step. This constant self-monitoring is exhausting. It's a slow, almost imperceptible shift, where you become less of your authentic self and more of a curated version designed to maintain a fragile equilibrium. The adjustments feel normal, necessary even, but they are a clear indication that the balance of power is skewed. Goal: lock attention before the main section. You might feel a subtle shift. A gentle nudge, almost imperceptible at first. It's not a push, not a shove. It's more like the tide, slowly but surely reshaping the shore. You start to question your own perceptions, just a little. Did that really happen the way you remember it? Or perhaps you're overthinking things? This feeling, this creeping doubt, is often the first sign. It's the quiet whisper that makes you second-guess your gut instinct. Consider a conversation where your opinion is consistently, subtly dismissed. Not with outright disagreement, but with a patronizing tone or a change of subject. You voice a concern, and it's met with a soft smile and a "don't worry about it, you're being too sensitive." The issue you raised is never addressed directly. Instead, the focus shifts to your emotional state. You're made to feel that your reaction is the problem, not the original situation. This tactic aims to make you doubt your judgment, to believe your feelings are invalid or exaggerated. Then, there's the gradual erosion of your boundaries. Small requests that become larger expectations. You agree to one minor favor, then another, and before you know it, you're consistently going out of your way. It feels normal because it happened over time. Each step was small enough not to raise alarm. You've adjusted your own behavior to accommodate the requests, thinking it's just part of being accommodating or a good friend. But the balance has shifted, and the effort is no longer equal. This insidious process often leads to a sense of confusion. You feel responsible for things that aren't truly your responsibility. You apologize for things you haven't done wrong. It's a disorienting experience, like trying to navigate a familiar room in the dark. Things feel off, but you can't quite pinpoint why. You begin to adjust your own actions, your own thoughts, to fit the new, subtly altered reality. This constant adjustment, this internal recalibration, is a powerful indicator that you are being guided, not by your own free will, but by external influence. You find yourself questioning your own memories. Small details about past conversations or events begin to shift in your mind. What you recall with certainty yesterday now feels hazy, uncertain. It's a subtle erosion, not a sudden break. You might replay interactions, trying to pin down what actually happened, but the clarity you once had slips away. This makes you hesitant to trust your own judgment, a crucial first step in losing footing. Your perception of reality starts to warp. Things that seem obviously wrong to an outsider are presented as perfectly normal, even logical, within your immediate circle. This normalization is key. It's not about outright lies, but about reframing. A demand that feels unreasonable is explained as a simple necessity. A boundary crossed is presented as a minor misunderstanding, easily smoothed over. You begin to accept these reframed versions because the alternative, that you are being misled, feels too uncomfortable to consider. You start to feel responsible for the manipulator's emotions or actions. Their bad moods become your fault. Their unhappiness is a sign you haven't done enough. This isn't about empathy, it's about misplaced accountability. You find yourself constantly trying to appease them, to fix what you perceive as your own shortcomings, rather than recognizing that their emotional state is their own to manage. This creates a cycle where you are always seeking approval and trying to prevent negative reactions, which keeps you off balance. Your boundaries are gradually pushed. What you once considered unacceptable behavior becomes a recurring event. Each instance is small, easily justified. They were just joking, or they didn't mean it that way. The significant thing is not the individual incident, but the slow, steady encroachment. You find yourself agreeing to things you don't want to do, or tolerating treatment you wouldn't have accepted before. It happens so incrementally that you don't notice the line being crossed until you're already well past it, and then it feels too late to draw it back. #4. Mechanism of quiet control. Quiet control is subtle. It doesn't involve loud demands or overt threats. Instead, it's a slow erosion of your own certainty. You start to question your own perceptions. Little things shift. A conversation is remembered differently by the other person. Your feelings are dismissed as overreactions. This happens through consistent, small adjustments to reality. You might be told something happened a certain way, even if you were there and saw it differently. At first, you might push back. But over time, if this happens repeatedly, you begin to wonder. Maybe you are misremembering. Maybe you are being too sensitive. The manipulator doesn't need to be right, they just need you to doubt yourself. It's about making you reliant on their interpretation of events. They become the arbiter of truth. Your own judgment feels less reliable. This isn't about winning an argument, it's about winning your trust in their version of things. You start to internalize their perspective. What felt wrong initially begins to feel normal. You adjust your own standards to match theirs. This mechanism often operates by isolating you. When you can't easily confirm your reality with others, their version becomes more potent. You might find yourself less inclined to share your experiences, anticipating dismissal or distortion. The quiet control works best in the silence between what you know and what you are told. You begin to navigate the world through their filtered lens, often without realizing the shift. Briefly explain how manipulation works without force. Manipulation without force operates subtly, like a slow current beneath a calm surface. It doesn't involve direct commands or threats. Instead, it works by influencing your thoughts, feelings, and decisions indirectly. This is often achieved by playing on your natural human tendencies, your desire for approval, your fear of missing out, your need for belonging, or your tendency to trust authority. It's about planting seeds of doubt or suggestion that grow over time, shaping your perception of reality until you believe certain things or make certain choices are entirely your own. The manipulator carefully crafts situations, words, and silences to guide you toward their desired outcome, making you feel like you arrived at the conclusion yourself. Think of it as nudging. A constant, almost imperceptible shift in the environment. They might subtly reframe situations to make their perspective seem like the only logical one. They could selectively present information, highlighting what supports their agenda and omitting what doesn't. This creates a skewed reality where your understanding is based on an incomplete or biased picture. They might also use emotional leverage, not through overt anger, but through quiet disappointment, guilt, or even excessive praise that creates an unspoken obligation. You start to feel a gentle pressure, a persistent suggestion that makes one path seem more appealing or less risky than another, even if the reasoning isn't entirely sound. This process often feels normal because it's gradual. You don't wake up one day and realize you're being manipulated. It's a slow erosion of your own independent judgment. Each instance is small, easily dismissed. Perhaps a friend consistently steers conversations toward a specific topic, or a colleague always finds a way to make you feel slightly inadequate about your contributions, subtly pushing you to agree with their ideas. You might find yourself apologizing more often than you feel is necessary, or making decisions that don't quite align with your initial instincts, simply because it feels easier or avoids a perceived conflict. The manipulator's goal is to alter your internal compass without you noticing the needle moving. Focus on gradual adaptation, self-doubt, and cooperation. You start to adjust. Little by little. It's not a sudden shift. It's a slow bending. You find yourself agreeing to things that, at first, felt slightly off. A small compromise here. A minor concession there. This happens so gradually that you barely notice the change. It feels like a natural evolution of the relationship or the situation. You're just being flexible. You're being a good partner. You're cooperating. Then comes the doubt. You start questioning your own judgment. Did first overreact? Was first being too sensitive? This internal questioning is key. Someone else's perspective begins to feel more valid than your own. You might find yourself replaying conversations, searching for evidence that you were the one who was wrong or unreasonable. The certainty you once had about your own feelings or boundaries begins to erode. It's a subtle erosion, like water on stone. This doubt makes cooperation easier for them. When you're unsure of yourself, you're more likely to defer. You're more likely to go along with what others suggest. It feels like the path of least resistance. It feels like the mature thing to do. You want to maintain harmony. You want to be seen as reasonable. So you agree. You adapt. You cooperate. The small adjustments become bigger ones. The self-doubt becomes a constant hum. You're not being manipulated, you're simply going with the flow. Or so it seems. Optional reference to psychology is shadow, perception, conditioning. You start to second-guess your own memories. Things you recall happening, or words you know were said, begin to feel fuzzy. Someone might gently correct you, not with anger, but with a kind of knowing patience. They might say, "Are you sure about that?" First, don't remember it quite like that. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, you begin to believe them. This isn't about outright lying, it's about subtly shifting your perception of reality, making your internal compass spin. It's like a shadow, a part of your own mind, that you can no longer fully grasp, its edges blurred by someone else's narrative. Your emotional responses feel slightly off, or perhaps, they feel too strong. You might find yourself reacting with a disproportionate amount of guilt or anxiety over something small. Someone else's calm demeanor can make your own feelings seem irrational, even to you. They might not directly criticize your emotions, but their reaction, or lack thereof, can imply that your feelings are somehow inappropriate. This subtle conditioning teaches you to suppress certain reactions, to align your emotional output with what seems acceptable to them. What once felt like a natural feeling now seems like an overreaction, a glitch in your own system. You find yourself constantly seeking validation for your thoughts and actions. Before making a decision, you might pause, wondering what they would think. You might rephrase your own ideas, trying to make them sound more palatable, more in line with what you anticipate their approval to be. This isn't a conscious choice. It's a learned behavior, a response to subtle rewards and punishments. The conditioning has worked, your internal reward system is now linked to their perceived approval. Your sense of self-worth becomes tethered to their opinion, even if you don't realize it. Things that were once important to you start to fade in significance. Your hobbies, your friendships, your personal goals, they get pushed aside, not through force, but through a gradual redirection of your energy and attention. It feels natural, almost like a natural progression of life. You tell yourself you're growing, changing. But in reality, your focus has been meticulously trained, your perception of what truly matters has been subtly altered. The conditioning has taken root, shaping your desires and priorities without you ever noticing the hand that guided them. Goal: provide intellectual grounding. It begins subtly. You notice a shift in your own thoughts, a gentle redirection that feels entirely your own. It's the quiet erosion of your certainty. You find yourself second-guessing decisions you were once sure of, questioning your own judgment in ways that seem, at first glance, like healthy self-reflection. This feeling isn't born from a sudden revelation of your own error, but from an external suggestion that has seeped into your internal monologue. It's the constant, almost imperceptible nudge towards a different perspective, a perspective that benefits someone else. Consider the way your boundaries are tested. Not with a forceful push, but with a series of small concessions. You agree to a minor inconvenience, then another, and another. Each step feels manageable, even reasonable, in isolation. The cumulative effect, however, is a significant shift in what you are willing to accept. Your comfort zone slowly expands, not because you chose to explore it, but because it was strategically widened for you. This isn't about compromise, it's about a gradual recalibration of your personal standards, often without your conscious consent. Another sign is the distortion of information. Facts are selectively presented, or framed in a way that subtly alters their meaning. You might receive only part of a story, or have the context deliberately omitted. This creates a skewed reality, one where your understanding is incomplete, making it easier for others to guide your conclusions. You begin to operate with incomplete data, believing you have the full picture, when in reality, key pieces have been strategically withheld or reframed to serve a particular narrative. This curated reality makes your own thoughts and reactions seem like natural responses to the information you possess. You also start to feel an increased reliance on the manipulator for validation or direction. When faced with a choice, your first instinct becomes to consider what they would think or advise. This isn't a sign of healthy trust, but a learned dependence. Your own internal compass, once reliable, begins to falter, and you look outwards for guidance, not because you seek genuine support, but because you have been conditioned to believe that their perspective is the most accurate or beneficial. This creates a subtle dependency, where your autonomy is slowly traded for perceived reassurance or clarity. You find yourself questioning your own memories. Small details about past conversations or events begin to shift in your mind. What you recall with certainty yesterday now feels hazy, uncertain. It's a subtle erosion, not a sudden break. You might replay interactions, trying to pin down what actually happened, but the clarity you once had slips away. This makes you hesitant to trust your own judgment, a crucial first step in losing footing. Your perception of reality starts to warp. Things that seem obviously wrong to an outsider are presented as perfectly normal, even logical, within your immediate circle. This normalization is key. It's not about outright lies, but about reframing. A demand that feels unreasonable is explained as a simple necessity. A boundary crossed is presented as a minor misunderstanding, easily smoothed over. You begin to accept these reframed versions because the alternative, that you are being misled, feels too uncomfortable to consider. You start to feel responsible for the manipulator's emotions or actions. Their bad moods become your fault. Their unhappiness is a sign you haven't done enough. This isn't about empathy, it's about misplaced accountability. You find yourself constantly trying to appease them, to fix what you perceive as your own shortcomings, rather than recognizing that their emotional state is their own to manage. This creates a cycle where you are always seeking approval and trying to prevent negative reactions, which keeps you off balance. Your boundaries are gradually pushed. What you once considered unacceptable behavior becomes a recurring event. Each instance is small, easily justified. They were just joking, or they didn't mean it that way. The significant thing is not the individual incident, but the slow, steady encroachment. You find yourself agreeing to things you don't want to do, or tolerating treatment you wouldn't have accepted before. It happens so incrementally that you don't notice the line being crossed until you're already well past it, and then it feels too late to draw it back. #5. The 7 signs, main body. You start to question your own judgment. Little things begin to feel off. You might find yourself second-guessing decisions you were once sure about. This isn't about a simple mistake, it's a persistent, nagging doubt about your own perceptions. Someone might subtly twist your words, making you believe you said something you didn't, or that you implied something unintended. This happens in conversations, in emails, even in casual remarks. The effect is a slow erosion of your confidence in your own memory and interpretation of events. It's like a fog rolling in, making it harder to see clearly. Then, you notice a shift in your boundaries. What used to be unacceptable suddenly seems negotiable. It's a gradual process. A request that would have once been a firm no might become a hesitant maybe, or even a reluctant yes. This isn't about compromise, it's about the lines you've drawn for yourself being subtly redrawn by someone else. They might use guilt, or feigned helplessness, or even a calculated display of disappointment to make you feel obligated to bend. Your sense of personal space, your time, your emotional energy, these boundaries begin to feel permeable, less respected, yet you might not be able to pinpoint exactly when that shift occurred. You also find yourself making excuses for their behavior. When they do something that crosses a line or causes you discomfort, your mind races to find reasons why it's not a big deal. You might tell yourself they're just stressed, or that they didn't mean it that way, or that you're being too sensitive. This is a defense mechanism, yes, but it's also a sign that you are actively working to maintain a status quo that is no longer healthy. These justifications are like a soft cushion you're placing between yourself and a harder reality, making the impact less jarring, but also obscuring the truth. Finally, you begin to feel a constant, low-level anxiety. It's not a panic, but a persistent unease. You might feel on edge, as if you're walking on eggshells. There's a sense of needing to be careful, to anticipate their reactions, to manage their moods. This feeling is your body's way of telling you that something is not right, that the environment is not safe or stable. It's a quiet alarm bell, ringing continuously in the background of your daily life, a subtle but undeniable indicator that your well-being is being compromised. Present the call list. You start questioning your own perceptions. Small things begin to feel off. You find yourself second-guessing decisions you were certain about moments before. It's a subtle erosion of confidence, a quiet whisper that maybe you're overreacting, or perhaps you misunderstood. This self-doubt isn't sudden, it's a gradual shift, making you feel less grounded in your own reality. You feel an increasing need for external validation. Before, you might have trusted your instincts. Now, you find yourself seeking approval for even minor choices. You might ask friends or colleagues for their opinions more often than usual, not to gather information, but to confirm what you think you should be thinking or feeling. This reliance on others becomes a crutch, weakening your internal compass. Your boundaries begin to blur. What was once unacceptable now seems negotiable. You might find yourself agreeing to things that go against your initial comfort level, telling yourself it's for the sake of peace or a larger goal. These concessions aren't usually a big, dramatic event. They are small, incremental shifts that, over time, redefine what you consider acceptable behavior from others and yourself. You notice a pattern of being isolated from your support system. Conversations with friends or family might be subtly discouraged, or you might find yourself making excuses for why you can't connect. This isn't always overt. It could be a suggestion that certain people don't understand, or that you're better off handling things on your own. The effect is a slow detachment, leaving you more reliant on the manipulator's perspective. You feel a constant sense of unease or anxiety, even when things appear calm on the surface. There's an underlying hum of discomfort that you can't quite pinpoint. It's like walking on eggshells, always anticipating a shift in mood or an unexpected reaction. This persistent tension wears you down, making you more susceptible to suggestion. You begin to rationalize the manipulator's behavior. You find yourself making excuses for their actions, downplaying negative incidents, or focusing only on the positive moments. This mental gymnastics is an unconscious effort to maintain a semblance of normalcy and avoid confronting the unsettling truth. You might tell yourself they didn't mean it, or that you provoked them in some way. Your sense of personal responsibility shifts. You start taking on blame for things that aren't your fault, or you feel overly responsible for the manipulator's emotions and well-being. This can manifest as apologizing excessively, or feeling guilty when you try to assert your own needs. It's a subtle redefinition of accountability, placing the burden of their actions onto your shoulders. Each sign should include: you start questioning your own memory. Small details from conversations, events, or agreements begin to feel hazy. You might recall something one way, but someone else insists it happened differently, and their version slowly starts to feel more plausible than your own. This isn't about forgetting, it's about a subtle erosion of your confidence in what you know to be true. They might say things like, "Are you sure that's what happened?" or "First remember it quite differently," and "First have a good memory." The constant gentle pressure makes you second-guess yourself, making their narrative seem more stable. Your perception of reality begins to shift. Things that once seemed clear and obvious become clouded. You might find yourself making excuses for someone's behavior or downplaying their actions because it's easier than confronting the uncomfortable truth. It feels like you're adjusting your perspective to fit their version of events, even if it doesn't quite align with your initial feelings. This adjustment happens so gradually that you don't notice it's happening. It's like a slow leak, imperceptible until the room is already damp. You find yourself constantly seeking approval or validation from this person. Their opinions start to carry an unusual weight, and you may alter your own decisions or beliefs to align with what you think they want. A simple compliment from them can feel disproportionately rewarding, while any perceived disapproval can cause significant anxiety. This dependence grows insidiously, making you feel that their good opinion is essential for your own sense of worth or stability. There's a persistent feeling of unease or confusion in your interactions. Even when things seem outwardly fine, a subtle discomfort lingers. You might feel like you're walking on eggshells, unsure of what might trigger a negative reaction. This isn't overt conflict, it's a low-level hum of anxiety that keeps you on edge, constantly monitoring the atmosphere and trying to maintain a precarious balance. It feels like a constant, low-grade fever of the soul. You begin to doubt your own instincts and intuition. That inner voice that usually guides you becomes quieter, or you start to dismiss its warnings. When something feels off, you tell yourself you're overreacting or being too sensitive. This silencing of your intuition is a crucial step in manipulation, as it removes your most reliable internal compass. You start trusting their interpretation of events more than your own gut feeling, which is a dangerous surrender. Your boundaries become blurred or disregarded. You might find yourself agreeing to things you're not comfortable with, or feeling pressured to share more than you intend. What was once a firm line in the sand slowly erodes, or you find yourself constantly explaining and justifying your boundaries, as if they are unreasonable demands rather than necessary protections. They might subtly push back, making you feel guilty for having those boundaries in the first place. You feel increasingly isolated from others. This can happen subtly, with the manipulator creating situations where you spend less time with friends or family, or it can be more direct, with them casting doubt on your relationships or making you feel that only they truly understand you. This isolation makes you more dependent on them and less likely to receive outside perspectives that could reveal the manipulation. It's a slow severing of your support network, leaving you adrift. Asterisk relatable situation. You find yourself agreeing to things you normally wouldn't. It starts small. A friend asks for a favor, something slightly inconvenient, but you say yes. Then it escalates. You start taking on extra tasks at work, tasks that aren't really your responsibility. You tell yourself it's just being a team player, or that it's easier to just do it than argue. The requests become more demanding, the time commitment's larger, yet you continue to agree. It feels like a natural progression, a series of minor concessions that have added up. There's a subtle shift in your perception of reality. You begin to question your own judgment, your own memory of events. Someone might tell you something happened differently than you recall, and after a moment of certainty, a seed of doubt is planted. You might find yourself apologizing for things you didn't do, or feeling responsible for outcomes that weren't entirely your fault. It's a creeping feeling of uncertainty, a quiet erosion of your confidence in your own thoughts and feelings. This makes you more susceptible to accepting their version of events. Your boundaries start to blur, then disappear. What was once unacceptable becomes tolerable. The casual disregard for your time, the passive-aggressive comments, the constant need for reassurance, these things that would have once sent up red flags now seem like minor annoyances. You adapt. You adjust your expectations to fit the new reality presented to you. It's a gradual process, so much so that you might not even notice the change until someone else points out how much you've let slide. You feel a growing sense of obligation, even when it's not warranted. You might feel indebted to someone who has done very little for you, or who has actually caused you problems. This feeling of obligation can be a powerful tool. It makes you more likely to comply with requests, to overlook transgressions, and to prioritize their needs over your own. It's a manufactured debt, designed to keep you in a state of perpetual indebtedness and compliance. Asterisk emotional reaction. You find yourself questioning your own feelings. Not in a healthy way, but with a persistent, nagging doubt. It's like a low hum beneath your daily thoughts, a subtle dissonance that makes you second-guess your initial reactions. You might feel a flicker of annoyance at something someone said, but then you immediately dismiss it. No, that's not right, you tell yourself. They didn't mean it like that. First, overreacting. This internal dialogue, this immediate self-correction, is a powerful sign. It's your gut instinct being overridden, not by logic, but by an external pressure that wants you to believe your feelings are invalid. This erosion of your emotional compass leads to a creeping sense of confusion. You start to feel a little lost, unsure of where you stand. Conversations that should feel straightforward become murky. You might feel hurt by a comment, but then find yourself apologizing for your own sensitivity. The goal is to make you believe your emotional responses are excessive or inappropriate, so you begin to regulate them, to shrink them down to fit someone else's narrative. It's a slow process, almost imperceptible day by day. You just start to feel off. The emotional toll can manifest as a constant, low-level anxiety. You feel on edge, as if you're always waiting for something to go wrong, or for someone to point out your supposed flaws. This isn't about being naturally anxious, it's about being perpetually unsettled. Your emotional energy is being drained by this internal battle of questioning your own perceptions. You might feel a strange fatigue, not from physical exertion, but from the mental effort of constantly trying to reconcile your internal state with the external reality that's being subtly reshaped around you. You might also notice a diminished capacity for joy or a muted experience of positive emotions. When good things happen, the feeling doesn't quite reach you. There's a layer of detachment, a feeling that you're observing happiness rather than truly experiencing it. This can be a consequence of your emotional system being constantly on guard, anticipating negative outcomes or feeling that any happiness is temporary or undeserved. Your emotional landscape becomes a little grayer, a little less vibrant, as your ability to fully engage with your own feelings is subtly undermined. Asterisk hidden mechanism. It happens slowly. You don't notice it at first. It's like a subtle shift in the air, a quiet alteration of the landscape around you. The manipulator doesn't force. They guide. They plant seeds of doubt, not about themselves, but about your own perceptions. They might reframe a past event, suggesting your memory is faulty. They'll ask leading questions that subtly steer your conclusions. This isn't about outright lies. It's about carefully curated versions of reality. You start to question your own judgment, your own feelings. Consider how they might respond when you express a concern. Instead of acknowledging your feelings, they might turn it back on you. Are you sure you're not overreacting, or if that's just how you are, you tend to see the worst? They're not addressing the issue, they're labeling you. This creates a sense of unease, a feeling that you are the problem, not the situation. The goal is to make you less likely to voice concerns in the future, or to question them when you do. This mechanism often involves gaslighting, though not always overtly. It's the erosion of your confidence. You might find yourself apologizing for things you didn't do, or agreeing to things you're not comfortable with, simply to restore a sense of normalcy. The manipulator creates a situation where your internal compass feels unreliable. They become the fixed point, the arbiter of what's real. You begin to rely on their interpretation because yours feels shaky. They might also use isolation, subtly. Not by demanding you cut off friends, but by making you feel misunderstood by others. They'll highlight how only they truly understand you, or how others don't appreciate you the way they do. This makes their viewpoint seem more valid, more essential. When you're constantly being told your own perspective is flawed, and the only one who gets it is the manipulator, you start to believe them. It feels like a quiet, almost logical progression. You adjust. Build intensity with each sign. You start to question your own memories. Small inconsistencies appear in how you recall events, and you find yourself second-guessing what actually happened versus what you think you remember. It's a subtle shift, often dismissed as simple forgetfulness or stress. You might replay conversations in your head, trying to pinpoint the exact words, only to find the details blurring. This self-doubt is the first crack, a sign that your internal compass is being nudged. Then, your perception of others begins to warp. You might find yourself feeling unusually defensive around certain people, or conversely, overly apologetic for things that don't seem like your fault. You start to accept explanations that don't quite add up, rationalizing them because they come from a trusted source. The need to maintain harmony, or avoid conflict, becomes a powerful motivator, overriding your natural sense of what's right or wrong. It feels like a small compromise, but it's a concession to an external influence. Your boundaries become permeable. You find yourself agreeing to things you wouldn't normally do, or letting small annoyances slide that would have previously bothered you. It's not that you've changed your core values, it's more that the effort required to enforce your boundaries feels disproportionately high. You might tell yourself it's easier this way, or that the other person's needs are more important. This gradual erosion of your personal space creates an opening, making you more susceptible to further influence. Finally, you experience a creeping sense of unease, a feeling that something is off, yet you can't quite articulate what it is. It's a background hum of discomfort that you try to ignore. You might feel a constant, low-level anxiety, or a strange sense of obligation that doesn't stem from any clear commitment. This is the culmination, the point where the subtle nudges have become a steady pressure. You are operating on assumptions and perceptions that have been carefully curated, and the awareness, though unsettling, is the first step toward reclaiming your own reality. The final sign should feel like the most powerful realization. You start to question your own memory. Little things. Did you say that? Did they really say that? It's a subtle erosion of your certainty. You might find yourself replaying conversations, trying to pin down the exact words, the exact tone. They'll dismiss your doubts, of course. "Oh, you must be mistaken," they'll say, with a gentle smile. That's not quite how it happened. It feels like a small correction at first, a minor adjustment to reality. Then, you notice the pattern of agreement. You find yourself constantly yielding, not because you've changed your mind, but because it's easier. Their perspective starts to feel like the default. You begin to anticipate their reactions, shaping your own thoughts and words to avoid conflict or disapproval. It's a quiet surrender, a slow bending of your will to match theirs. This isn't about compromise, it's about a gradual alignment that feels less like choice and more like inevitability. Your own opinions begin to feel less important. Or perhaps, less valid. They subtly shift blame. When something goes wrong, it's never their fault. It's always a circumstance, a misunderstanding, or, most unnervingly, something you did or didn't do. You become the unwitting custodian of their mistakes. This creates a constant, low-level anxiety. You're always on guard, anticipating the next misstep that will be laid at your feet. You start apologizing for things you didn't cause, simply to restore a sense of peace, a fleeting moment of harmony. This constant self-correction erodes your confidence. And the final, most profound sign. You realize you've been adapting your entire personality to suit them. The things you once loved, the opinions you held firmly, the very way you express yourself, it's all been subtly reshaped. You look in the mirror and see someone who is quieter, more agreeable, less vibrant. It's not a sudden change, but a slow, almost imperceptible drift. You've become a reflection, a softer version of yourself, molded by the constant pressure of their expectations and subtle disapproval. The realization isn't a shout, it's a cold, quiet understanding that the person you thought you were is no longer entirely present, replaced by a version that fits their design. You find yourself questioning your own memories. Small details about past conversations or events begin to shift in your mind. What you recall with certainty yesterday now feels hazy, uncertain. It's a subtle erosion, not a sudden break. You might replay interactions, trying to pin down what actually happened, but the clarity you once had slips away. This makes you hesitant to trust your own judgment, a crucial first step in losing footing. Your perception of reality starts to warp. Things that seem obviously wrong to an outsider are presented as perfectly normal, even logical, within your immediate circle. This normalization is key. It's not about outright lies, but about reframing. A demand that feels unreasonable is explained as a simple necessity. A boundary crossed is presented as a minor misunderstanding, easily smoothed over. You begin to accept these reframed versions because the alternative, that you are being misled, feels too uncomfortable to consider. You start to feel responsible for the manipulator's emotions or actions. Their bad moods become your fault. Their unhappiness is a sign you haven't done enough. This isn't about empathy, it's about misplaced accountability. You find yourself constantly trying to appease them, to fix what you perceive as your own shortcomings, rather than recognizing that their emotional state is their own to manage. This creates a cycle where you are always seeking approval and trying to prevent negative reactions, which keeps you off balance. Your boundaries are gradually pushed. What you once considered unacceptable behavior becomes a recurring event. Each instance is small, easily justified. They were just joking, or they didn't mean it that way. The significant thing is not the individual incident, but the slow, steady encroachment. You find yourself agreeing to things you don't want to do, or tolerating treatment you wouldn't have accepted before. It happens so incrementally that you don't notice the line being crossed until you're already well past it, and then it feels too late to draw it back. #6. Realization and exit. You start to notice a pattern. Not a sudden jolt, but a slow dawning. Things that felt subtly off now begin to connect. It's like seeing a glitch in the matrix, a repeated error in a conversation. You replay past interactions, and a different narrative emerges. The compliments that felt a little too pointed, the favors that came with an unspoken price, the way your own opinion seemed to shift after speaking with them. This realization isn't about anger. It's about clarity. You see the script, the carefully placed words, the subtle nudges. The feeling isn't one of betrayal, but of observation. You understand the mechanics. The way your boundaries were tested and then, almost imperceptibly, redrawn. It's the quiet confirmation that your intuition was right all along. You start to recognize the signs not as anomalies, but as deliberate actions. The exit isn't always dramatic. Often, it's a quiet withdrawal. A gradual distancing. You stop sharing certain information. You limit your availability. You choose not to engage with the manipulative tactics. It's about reclaiming your space, your thoughts, your decisions. You learn to say no, not with an explanation, but with a simple finality. You understand that your energy is finite, and you decide where it is best spent. This awareness gives you a quiet strength. You are no longer a pawn in someone else's game. You are an observer, an architect of your own interactions. The manipulation loses its power when it is seen for what it is. You can then choose to disengage, to redirect your focus, to simply walk away. It's a process of reclaiming your autonomy, one conscious decision at a time. Reframe the experience. This is pattern recognition, not paranoia. You start noticing a pattern. It's not a sudden flash of insight, but a slow dawning. You tell yourself it's just a coincidence, a misunderstanding. This feeling, this nagging doubt, it's easy to dismiss. You tell yourself you're overthinking things, that you're being too sensitive. It's a common reaction. The mind naturally seeks order, and when confronted with chaos, it tries to smooth it over. So, you smooth it over. You rationalize. You find reasons why what you're experiencing is perfectly normal, perfectly acceptable. It's just how people are, you think. It's just how this particular person is. This is not paranoia. This is observation. This is where pattern recognition comes in. You've seen this before, perhaps not with this person, but in similar interactions. A subtle shift in conversation, a carefully worded question that steers you in a specific direction. It's like a faint scent on the wind, almost imperceptible, but there. You might have felt a flicker of unease, a brief moment of disorientation, and then it passes. You adjust. You adapt. You accept the new reality that has been subtly constructed around you. The key is that it feels gradual. It feels like a natural evolution of the relationship or situation. You don't feel pushed, you feel guided, almost imperceptibly. Consider how a narrative can be subtly altered. A past event is recalled, but the details are shifted just enough to change your perception of your own role in it. Or perhaps your feelings about something are gently reframed. What you felt was a valid emotion is now presented as an overreaction, a misunderstanding on your part. You start to doubt your own memory, your own emotional responses. This isn't about outright lies, it's about selective emphasis and subtle rewording. It's the art of making you question your own internal compass. This is where the feeling of some first crazy begins to creep in, but it's a sign that your observational skills are actually kicking in. You are recognizing dissonance. When you start to question your own perceptions, it's a sign that your mind is working. It's trying to reconcile what you are experiencing with what you believe to be true. This internal conflict is not a sign of mental instability, it is a sign of your awareness attempting to process something that doesn't quite add up. It's about noticing the small inconsistencies, the slight discrepancies that, when viewed together, form a larger picture. This is not paranoia, it is the emergence of clarity. It is the moment you begin to see the threads, even if you can't yet fully grasp the tapestry they are weaving. You are learning to read the subtle language of influence. Offer a calm way out, awareness, distance, observation. Awareness is the first step. It's recognizing the subtle shifts, the quiet nudges that steer your decisions. You start to notice a pattern, a feeling that things aren't quite aligning with your own thoughts, yet they feel plausible. This isn't about grand pronouncements or overt pressure. It's the gentle, persistent suggestion that makes you question your initial instincts. You might find yourself agreeing to something you're unsure about, not because you've been convinced logically, but because the alternative feels like creating unnecessary conflict. This internal dissonance, this quiet hum of doubt, is a sign. It's the moment you pause, even for a second, and wonder if this path is truly yours. Distance allows you to see more clearly. When you're too close to a situation, the fine details blur, and the overall picture becomes distorted. Stepping back, even metaphorically, gives you perspective. It's like pulling out of a room to see the entire layout, not just the single piece of furniture you were focused on. This distance isn't about cutting people off, it's about creating space for independent thought. You might find yourself taking a break from a conversation or consciously delaying a decision until you've had time to process it away from the immediate influence. In this space, the emotional currents that might have clouded your judgment begin to recede, and a calmer, more rational assessment becomes possible. Observation is the active practice of watching without immediate judgment. It's about noticing the dynamics at play, the unspoken rules, the subtle reactions. You become an impartial observer of your own interactions. What is being said? More importantly, what is being implied? How do others respond to certain statements or suggestions? This isn't about suspicion, it's about understanding. You might notice how a particular topic always leads to a specific outcome, or how certain phrases consistently elicit a desired response. By observing these mechanisms, you begin to see the underlying currents, the invisible threads that connect actions and reactions. This detached observation empowers you to understand the forces at work without necessarily being swept away by them. End with a call to notice these patterns in real life. You start to question your own perceptions. A subtle suggestion, a gentle nudge, and suddenly your memory of an event feels fuzzy, uncertain. They might say, "Are you sure that's what happened?" First, remember it differently. This isn't about a simple disagreement. It's a persistent drip, eroding your confidence in your own mind. You find yourself second-guessing your instincts, wondering if you're overreacting or misinterpreting. It's a quiet invasion of your inner landscape, making you rely more on their version of reality than your own. Things begin to feel off, but you can't quite pinpoint why. There's an unease, a feeling that the ground beneath you isn't as solid as it should be. Conversations might leave you feeling drained, confused, or slightly guilty, even when you can't identify a specific wrong you've committed. They might twist your words, taking your statements out of context to create a narrative that benefits them. This constant subtle redirection, this almost imperceptible shaping of your thoughts and feelings, creates a constant undercurrent of anxiety. It feels normal because it's gradual, like the slow creep of dusk. Your boundaries start to blur. What was once unacceptable, a line you wouldn't cross, becomes more negotiable. It happens through a series of small compromises, each one seemingly insignificant on its own. They might push for a little more of your time, a little more of your resources, or a little more personal information, framing it as a sign of closeness or necessity. Each concession makes the next one easier. You might find yourself agreeing to things you'd normally refuse, telling yourself it's easier to just go along with it, or that it's not a big deal. You find yourself constantly apologizing. Even when you haven't done anything wrong, you feel the need to smooth things over, to de-escalate a situation that feels disproportionately tense. This feeling of being perpetually in the wrong, of needing to mend a relationship that isn't broken, is a powerful indicator. It suggests that the dynamic has shifted, and you're now the one managing the emotional equilibrium, often at your own expense. You might apologize for their reactions, for their moods, for things that are clearly not your responsibility. Isolation becomes a quiet companion. Friends and family might notice a change, but their concerns are often dismissed or framed as interference. They might be painted as jealous, misguided, or simply not understanding the special nature of your relationship. This gradual separation from your support system makes you more dependent on the manipulator, more susceptible to their influence. The world outside their sphere of control starts to seem less appealing, less valid. Your needs take a back seat. Your priorities, your desires, your well-being begin to feel secondary to the needs and desires of the manipulator. This isn't always overt. It can be through subtle guilt tripping, through appeals to loyalty, or through the sheer exhaustion of constantly defending your own space. You start to anticipate their needs, to prioritize their comfort over your own, not out of genuine care, but out of a learned necessity to maintain peace. You feel like you're walking on eggshells. There's a constant awareness of their mood, a careful calibration of your words and actions to avoid triggering a negative reaction. This hypervigilance is exhausting. It means you're not truly present, not truly free to be yourself. You're constantly monitoring the atmosphere, anticipating the next potential storm, and adjusting your behavior accordingly. This is the quiet price of maintaining a relationship where your own emotional safety is not guaranteed. Take a moment. Look around. Notice these patterns in your interactions, in your relationships, in the subtle shifts of your own internal compass. Finish with a comment trigger to boost engagement. You start questioning your own memory. Little inconsistencies appear in your recollection of events. Someone might say, "That's not quite how it happened," or "Are you sure you remember that correctly?" At first, it's easy to dismiss these as simple misunderstandings. You might think you're just tired, or perhaps you're overthinking things. But these subtle nudges, repeated over time, begin to erode your confidence in your own perception. It's a slow process, almost imperceptible, like water wearing away stone. This erosion often manifests as a growing self-doubt. You second-guess your decisions, your judgment, even your own feelings. A simple request can feel like a directive you must obey, not out of genuine agreement, but out of a newfound uncertainty about what you should be doing. You find yourself apologizing more often, even when you haven't done anything wrong, just to smooth over perceived awkwardness or to avoid potential conflict. This hesitancy to trust your own instincts becomes a breeding ground for external influence. Then there's the feeling that you're constantly walking on eggshells. Conversations can feel like minefields, where you're always trying to anticipate the other person's reaction. You might find yourself censoring your own thoughts or opinions, not because they are inherently offensive, but because you fear they will be misinterpreted or used against you. This creates a mental fatigue, a constant state of low-level anxiety. You begin to adjust your behavior, your words, even your own needs, to better fit the expectations of the manipulator, making their demands seem like your own desires. Finally, you notice a shift in your boundaries. What once felt like an intrusion or an unreasonable request now seems normal. You might find yourself agreeing to things you would have vehemently refused before, without a clear logical reason. It's as if the lines have blurred, and you've unconsciously accepted a new set of rules. This gradual acceptance of the unacceptable is a hallmark of subtle manipulation, where the normal is redefined around you, one small concession at a time. What's one specific instance where you felt your reality was subtly questioned? You've seen the signs. The subtle shifts. The moments you questioned yourself, then dismissed it. It's not about blame. It's about awareness. Recognizing the pattern when it appears. The slow erosion of your certainty. The feeling that you're always slightly off balance. That it's *you star. But it's not always you. Sometimes, it's them. Observing these tactics is the first step. The most crucial step. Now, you know what to look for. You can start to see it. Not just in others, but in those quiet moments where your own reality feels adjusted. Next time, we'll explore a related topic, the art of subtle deflection. How to steer a conversation away from uncomfortable truths, and why it's so effective. Stay observant.